At 4:10 a.m., a massive Russian supply convoy was advancing from Armyansk toward the Chonhar Bridge along a muddy dirt road. The formation consisted of 55 trucks carrying ammunition and weapons, 70 fuel tankers, and 18 BMPT Terminator tank support combat vehicles serving as escorts. A total of 143 vehicles stretched for nearly 1.5 kilometers, carrying more than 700 tons of artillery, ammunition, missiles, and military supplies, along with nearly 1,500 tons of fuel intended for Russian forces in Crimea. After a series of strikes on the R-330 route and the Kerch Bridge, Russia was forced to divert its supply convoys onto rural tracks, abandoned fields, and less observed corridors to avoid Ukrainian reconnaissance UAVs. But Ukraine had also expanded its search area to those very diversion routes. To conceal the real convoy, Russia sent a decoy formation with air defense systems and armored vehicles onto the R-330 route to attract Ukrainian UAVs. Meanwhile, the convoy carrying fuel and ammunition quietly advanced toward Chonhar. But that secret route had already been discovered. At 4 concealed positions along the route, 4 Ukrainian teams simultaneously activated 40 FPV drones. Within just 2 seconds, their motors accelerated to maximum revolutions, while reconnaissance UAVs above continuously transmitted the coordinates of each vehicle to the control teams. On the camera screens, the Russian convoy stretched along the muddy road and was only about 15 minutes away from the Chonhar Bridge. Once it crossed, it would enter an area more heavily protected by Russian air defenses and ground forces. Ukraine had only one chance to stop it. If the fuel and ammunition reached Crimea, Russian artillery, tank, and mechanized units could continue fighting for weeks. But only minutes later, what appeared to be a top-secret supply operation would turn into a terrifying ambush. But the moment the 40 FPV drones transmitted their first control signals, Ukraine's element of surprise immediately disappeared. Within the Russian formation, an R-330Zh Zhitel electronic warfare system mounted on a CAM-AZ 43114 chassis detected 4 clusters of emissions from the UAV's control and video links. Zhitel immediately activated its jamming systems. On the Ukrainian pilot's screens, the images began to stutter. White noise covered each frame, latency increased, and several FPVs responded more slowly to commands. But Zhitel could only narrow down the direction of the transmissions. To destroy the control teams, Russia still needed precise coordinates. At an altitude of nearly 2,500 meters, an Orlan 3.0 immediately changed course, using its optical and thermal sensors to scan the tree lines, abandoned buildings, trenches, and camouflage nets along both sides of the route. After a single sweep, it confirmed the 2 control bunkers closest to the convoy. Beneath the camouflage were active signal amplifiers, rows of heat-emitting batteries, and Ukrainian soldiers moving around the positions. The 2 signal clusters farther back had not yet been located with sufficient precision. The coordinates were immediately transmitted to a 2S-19 EMS-to-S self-propelled artillery battery positioned approximately 15 kilometers from the convoy. The first fire mission began. 2 152mm Krasnopol M2 rounds were loaded and fired several seconds apart. The Orlan 3.0 continued to keep both bunkers within its field of view, ready to illuminate each target with a laser during the round's terminal phase. Near the artillery battery, a 1L260 Zhupark 1M counter-battery radar continuously scanned the battlefield to detect and locate any Ukrainian return fire. Russia's targeting chain was now complete. 2 Krasnopol rounds had left the barrels, but inside the 2 forward bunkers, the Ukrainian operators still did not know that they had just become the first targets. The 2 forward bunkers were controlling the 20 leading FPV drones, with each team responsible for 10 UAVs. When Zhitel's jamming intensified, the video feeds began to flicker, and the reconnaissance network warned that their positions might have been located. The Ukrainian teams understood that they had less than 90 seconds remaining. They were forced to transfer all 20 FPV drones to the 2 reserve teams farther back, each of which was already controlling 10 UAVs of its own. The transfer order was issued. For 3 seconds, the 20 FPV drones had no direct human control. Their flight controllers maintained stability and altitude while continuing along their last heading. At a speed of 140 kilometers per hour, they could travel nearly 116 meters without guidance. Those were the 3 most dangerous seconds of the ambush. A single error in frequency synchronization or link coding could cause the UAVs to drift off course, collide with one another, or plunge into the mud. During the first second, the rear systems confirmed the link codes. Over the next 2 seconds, 20 video feeds appeared simultaneously on the new screens. Every UAV was still airborne. The two reserve teams immediately stabilized the formation, with each position now controlling 20 FPV drones. Meanwhile, the soldiers inside the two forward bunkers shut down their transmitters, removed the antennas, collected all their equipment, and left the area. 30 seconds later, the first Krasnopol struck the bunker on the left. Several seconds after that, the R-330 shifted its laser designation and guided the second round into the remaining bunker. The two forward positions had been destroyed, but the 20 FPV drones continued flying. However, the very transfer that had saved them also exposed the two reserve bunkers farther back. But saving the 20 FPV drones made the two reserve bunkers easier to detect. After the transfer, each rear team had to control 20 UAVs. 40 video and control links concentrated in two areas nearly doubled the emission density. On Zhitel's display, two new signal clusters immediately lit up. The directional data was passed to the R-330. After a single optical and thermal scan, the Russian UAV detected signal amplifiers, active battery arrays, and human figures moving around the two reserve bunkers. The two Ukrainian teams understood that they had been detected. The jamming intensified, the images stuttered, frames disappeared, and latency increased. This was no longer the aftermath of the previous artillery strike. The MTAS battery was preparing a second fire mission. At the firing position approximately 15 kilometers away, the Russian crews loaded high explosive fragmentation rounds to force the enemy from their positions while also preparing Krasnopol M2 rounds for the precision strike. The first round landed nearly 250 meters from the bunker on the right. Earth and debris covered the camouflage netting, but the pilots kept their hands on the controls. In front of them, 40 video feeds continued to flicker as the FPV swarm raced toward the convoy at nearly 150 kilometers per hour. Ukraine needed only about 1.5 seconds to transfer control. The two teams decided to withdraw in sequence. The team on the left temporarily received all 20 UAVs from the team on the right, controlling all 40 FPV drones at once. The right-hand team immediately removed its antennas, collected its equipment, and ran to an alternate bunker several hundred meters away. Another round exploded 170 meters from the old position. But the team on the right had already left. Once the new station was operational, the 20 FPV drones were transferred back. The left-hand team then repeated the process, handing over its UAVs, collecting its equipment, and leaving the bunker before the R-330 began laser designation. Several dozen seconds later, two Krasnopol rounds destroyed the two old reserve bunkers one after the other. Russia once again struck the exact coordinates. But the operators had left before the rounds arrived. While Zhitel attempted to reacquire the two new signal clusters, the 40 FPV drones entered the final 2 minutes of the attack. 40 FPV drones were racing toward the Russian convoy from 4 directions at nearly 150 kilometers per hour. Each group maintained a separate altitude between 120 and 200 meters. A deviation of only a few seconds or several dozen meters could cause the UAVs to collide before reaching the target. After 2 transfers, the entire swarm was controlled by 2 Ukrainian teams, each managing 20 drones. Zhitel's jamming caused the video feeds to stutter, disappear, and then return. Each pilot could see only their own UAV and had to trust that the other groups were maintaining the correct formation. Ukraine switched to swarm tactics. The leading drones descended and accelerated, while those behind them moved outward and continuously changed position, creating dozens of approach paths. The objective was to prevent the BMPT Terminator crews from distinguishing the decoys from the drones actually diving toward the convoy. But the tactic was also extremely dangerous. A single turn at the wrong moment could cause a collision. Meanwhile, battery levels had fallen from 55 to 45%, strong winds were pushing the UAVs out of their corridors, and Russian artillery was still searching for the control teams. Ahead, 18 BMPT Terminators began deploying into combat formation. One moved to the front, another secured the rear, while the remaining 16 divided into 8 pairs along both sides of the convoy, which stretched for nearly 1.5 kilometers. 36 30mm 2A42 automatic cannons elevated simultaneously. Ukraine had only one chance. and when the 12 leading FPV drones entered the engagement zone, the wall of fire immediately closed around them. The 3 leading drones from each group dived in simultaneously, but this was not yet the main attack. These 12 FPV drones were used to force the BMPT Terminator crews to reveal how they detected and switched between targets. The first 30mm bursts immediately tore across the sky. In less than 10 seconds, 7 FPV drones were shot down. The remaining 5 continued changing altitude, circling around the front of the convoy and forcing the BMPTs to rotate their turrets repeatedly before being destroyed one by one. Ukraine lost all 12 leading drones, but they also saw what they needed to see. Whenever an unexpected target appeared, the BMPT crews still needed several seconds to detect it, rotate the turret, stabilize the guns, and re-establish the line of sight. The delay was very brief, but when multiple UAVs changed direction at the same time, the fields of fire began to separate. Attacking the front or rear of the convoy would not be effective. Only the western flank remained, where the Marshland made it difficult for the outer BMPTs to maneuver and widen their firing angles. The convergence order was issued. The remaining 28 FPV drones simultaneously turned west. The eastern group circled around the front of the convoy. The northern group descended. The southern drones accelerated along the dirt ruts, while the western group maintained its course to guide the entire swarm into a single corridor. Within seconds, the 4 attack groups merged into one mass. On the BMPT Terminator displays, the number of targets to the west surged. Some FPVs flew close to the ground, others climbed and then dived, forcing the gunners to change their firing angles continuously. The BMPTs kept firing, but every time one crew switched to a new target, other UAVs entered the gap that had just opened. The eastern turrets turned sharply toward the west, but trucks, fuel tankers, and other BMPTs blocked their lines of fire. Several vehicles near the marsh tried to reverse outward, but their tracks immediately sank into the mud. The wall of fire was still there, but it was no longer sealed, and 28 FPV drones were racing directly toward the gap that had just opened on the western flank. But opening a gap did not mean the convoy had lost its protection. To reach the fuel tankers and ammunition trucks, Ukraine first had to disable the BMPT Terminators guarding the western flank. Each FPV carried a warhead weighing approximately 3 kilograms. It could not penetrate the frontal armor, but it was powerful enough to destroy sensors, jam the turret, or ignite the engine compartment. 12 FPV drones separated from the formation and dived toward 4 pairs of BMPTs. At a range of approximately 600 meters, the 2 A-42 cannons opened fire simultaneously. 6 UAVs were torn apart in mid-air, while 2 others lost control and crashed into the marshland. But 4 broke through. 1 destroyed a sensor cluster. The second struck the turret ring. The other 2 crashed into the engine compartments, starting fires and forcing the crews to abandon their vehicles. Within seconds, 4 BMPTs were removed from the defensive network. The final 16 FPV drones immediately divided into 2 levels. 8 flew close to the ground through the smoke and dust, while the other 8 climbed and then dived. Russian fire shot down 9 more UAVs. 3 others lost their video feeds because of the jamming and crashed into the mud. But the final 4 passed through the gap. They did not attack at random. The first struck a fuel tanker near the front of the formation, creating a line of fire that blocked the route ahead. The second crashed into an ammunition truck in the center of the convoy, triggering a series of secondary explosions. The third set a fuel tanker at the rear on fire, blocking the withdrawal route. The final drone created another center of fire in an area densely packed with fuel and ammunition. In less than 1 minute, the convoy, stretching nearly 1.5 kilometers, was blocked at 3 points. The front could not advance, the rear could not turn around, and marshland lay on both sides. Fire spread from one vehicle to another. Artillery shells exploded inside the cargo compartments, while fragments pierced nearby fuel tanks and turned separate fires into a chain of blazes along the route. The remaining BMPTs attempted to clear an escape route, but wrecked vehicles, explosion craters, and mud had divided the formation. The armored escort had not been completely destroyed, but it had lost the ability to protect the convoy at the most dangerous moment. Ukraine did not need to destroy every vehicle. It only needed to block the front, seal the rear, and ignite the center. 40 FPV drones began the attack. 12 identified the weakness. 12 broke open the defensive flank. 16 rushed through the gap. And only 4 reached the convoy. but those 4 strikes were enough to turn a secret supply route into a corridor sealed by fire. One convoy had been stopped, but what all of us are waiting for is not more explosions, but the day when the guns finally fall silent. Leave the comment "Peace for Ukraine" if you also hope that day will come soon. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.